The capture focus. The capture of the first German spies and the decisive moment that started everything, September 6, 1940. 3:47 a.m., Dungeness Beach, Kent Coast, England. Lieutenant Colonel William Hinchley Cook stepped onto the wet sand as the cutting wind from the English Channel whipped his grey overcoat. Behind him, 6 MI5 soldiers spread across the beach, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The sound of waves masked any noise from their movements. They weren't alone on that beach. 2 hours earlier, radio operators at Hawkinge had detected German code transmissions coming from that coast. Short, nervous, desperate. Someone was trying to contact Hamburg, someone who shouldn't be there. Hinchley Cook raised his fist. His men stopped. In the silence that followed, he heard it. Low voices, German spoken with a Dutch accent. 500 meters ahead, near the cliffs, 2 silhouettes moved around a leather suitcase. Karl Mayr and Jose Waldberg didn't notice the trap until it was too late. When the flashlights exploded around them, they froze. Waldberg dropped the radio transmitter in the sand. Mayr slowly raised his hands, his widened eyes reflecting terror. "Hands on your head! Don't move!" ordered Hinchley Cook in perfect English. The 2 Abwehr spies, the German military intelligence service, had been deposited there by a U-boat submarine 4 hours earlier. Their mission: establish a spy network on British soil, transmit information about coastal defences, airfields and troop movements. It would last exactly 3 hours and 47 minutes. In the car that took them to London, Mayr trembled. Not from cold, but from fear. He knew the fate of captured spies. Waldberg remained silent, staring out the window at the passing darkness. They didn't know that capture would change the course of the war. Camp 020, Latchmere House, Richmond, London. September 8, 1940, Major Thomas Argyle Robertson, TAR, to colleagues, watched through the mirrored glass as Mayr was interrogated for the 3rd time in 48 hours. The German was broken. His hands shook when he held the cold tea mug they'd given him. Robertson was 30 years old, dark hair combed back, and an expression that rarely revealed emotion. But at that moment, something gleamed in his eyes. An idea. A dangerous and brilliant possibility. "He can be turned," Robertson said to Colonel John Cecil Masterman, who stood beside him. Masterman adjusted his glasses and frowned. At 51 years old, the Oxford academic-turned-intelligence officer had seen enough of war to know that desperate ideas could either save nations or destroy them. "Turned? You mean make him work for us?" "Not just him. All of them." Robertson turned away from the glass. His voice carried quiet intensity. "Every agent the Abwehr sends. We capture them, turn them, and feed false information back to Berlin. We don't just stop their espionage, we control it." The concept was audacious. Instead of simply executing captured spies or locking them away, MI5 would offer them a choice. Work for Britain or face the gallows. Those who agreed would continue transmitting to Germany, but every message would be crafted by British intelligence. The Germans would believe they had eyes and ears across Britain, never knowing those eyes saw only what Britain wanted them to see. Masterman was silent for a long moment. In that interrogation room, Mayr was explaining his training in Hamburg, the codes he'd been given, the contact schedules. He was giving them everything. "The 20 committee," Masterman finally said, "will need oversight. Coordination between MI5, MI6, military intelligence. Every message vetted, every piece of information carefully calibrated." Robertson nodded. "We'll call it the double-cross system." The name was perfect. Double-cross. Betrayal. XX, the Roman numeral for 20, matching their committee designation. A play on words that captured the essence of their mission. "Would you like me to continue developing the remaining 7 sections to complete the 50-minute video script?" Section 2. The birth of double-cross focus. How the system was created and the formation of the 20 Committee, December 16, 1940. 58 St. James's Street, London, MI5 headquarters. The room smelled of pipe tobacco and strong tea. 8 men sat around an oak table, their faces illuminated by the weak winter light filtering through blackout curtains. Outside, London still smouldered from last night's bombing raid. Inside, they were about to change the nature of warfare itself. John Cecil Masterman tapped his pen against the table edge, a nervous habit he'd developed during his years at Oxford. Before him lay files on 17 captured German agents, 17 opportunities, 17 potential weapons. "Gentlemen," he began, adjusting his wire-rimmed spectacles, "we stand at a crossroads. Every spy the Abwehr sends to Britain has either surrendered or been captured. Not some, not most. All of them." Major Thomas Robertson stood and walked to the window. Below, Londoners hurried through streets lined with rubble. They didn't know how vulnerable Britain truly was, or how brilliant its defense might become. "The question," Robertson said without turning, "is not whether we can control German intelligence. We already do. The question is, how far can we take this?" Lieutenant Colonel Robin Tin Eye Stevens, commander of Camp 020, spoke next. His voice carried the authority of a man who had broken hundreds of prisoners without laying a finger on them. The monocle that earned him his nickname glinted as he leaned forward. "My interrogations have revealed something remarkable. The Abwehr trusts its agents implicitly. They believe every transmission they receive. They have no independent verification system. No checks, no balances. They're blind and they don't know it." Around that table, the 20 committee was born. 20, written as XX, in Roman numerals, a double cross. Their mandate was unprecedented: control every German agent in Britain, feed them carefully crafted disinformation, and use them to manipulate German military decisions. It would require coordination between MI5, MI6, military intelligence, and military operations. Every message transmitted to Germany would pass through this committee. Every lie would be meticulously designed to support Allied strategy. Masterman outlined the principles. First, captured agents would be offered a stark choice: work for Britain or face execution as spies under the Treachery Act of 1940. Most chose life. Second, every transmission must contain enough truth to maintain credibility. Complete fabrication would arouse suspicion. The art lay in mixing accurate but harmless information with critical falsehoods. Third, and most crucial, the system required patience. Building German trust would take months, even years. Agents must occasionally provide accurate intelligence, even if it meant giving the enemy real information. The payoff would come later, when that trust could be weaponized to deliver catastrophic deceptions. "We're not just running spies," Robertson said, returning to his seat. "We're writing a script. The Germans think they're reading Britain's secrets. In reality, they're reading fiction we've authored specifically for them." The implications were staggering. If executed properly, the double-cross system could control German military planning. Every strategic decision Hitler's generals made would be based on contaminated intelligence. The Führer would move divisions to defend against phantom invasions. He would hold back reserves to counter attacks that would never come. He would fortify empty beaches while Allied forces landed elsewhere unopposed. January 1941, Camp 020, Lachmere House. The interrogation of Wolf Schmidt was entering its 4th day. The Danish agent sat across from Stevens, exhausted but unbroken. He'd been captured on September 19, 1940, after parachuting into Cambridgeshire with a radio transmitter and $1,000 in cash. "You have a choice, Schmidt," Stevens said, his voice steady and clinical. "You can continue this pretense of loyalty to Germany and hang at Pentonville prison, or you can acknowledge reality. The war is lost for Germany, and you can help end it sooner by working with us." Physical violence was forbidden at Camp 020. Stevens had court-martialed interrogators for striking prisoners, but psychological pressure? That was an art form. The cells were bugged. Every private conversation was recorded. Prisoners who bragged about withholding information found their secrets exposed in the next interrogation. The impression of omniscience was total. Schmidt broke on the 5th day. He became Agent Tate, one of the double-cross system's longest-serving agents. For the next 4 years, he would transmit over 1,800 messages to Hamburg, each one crafted by MI5 to deceive and misdirect. The Germans would award him the Iron Cross in absentia, never knowing their trusted agent was feeding them lies from a house in Radlett, supervised by British handlers. The machine was operational. Now, it needed players. The players: focus. Profiles of key double agents who made the system work. February 14th, 1942, Lisbon, Portugal. Juan Pujol García sat in a café on the Rocio, composing his latest report for the Abwehr. Around him, Lisbon thrived as Europe's neutral crossroads, a city of spies, refugees, and opportunists. Pujol fit none of those categories. He was something stranger, a spy who was spying on no one. The Spanish chicken farmer had developed an obsessive hatred for totalitarianism after witnessing the Spanish Civil War. He'd approached the British embassy in Madrid, offering to spy for them against the Nazis. They rejected him. Undeterred, Pujol approached the Germans instead, convincing them he was a fanatical fascist who could establish a spy network in Britain. The Abwehr accepted. They gave him training, invisible ink, $600, and instructions to travel to London and recruit sub-agents. Pujol never went to Britain. He moved to Lisbon, bought a blue guide to England, studied train timetables and cinema newsreels, and began fabricating reports based entirely on public sources. He invented agents across Britain: a Portuguese commercial traveller, a Swiss businessman, a Venezuelan student, a Welsh Aryan fanatic. None existed. All sent intelligence to Pujol, who forwarded it to Madrid. The Abwehr was ecstatic. Their agent in London, codename Alaric, was producing detailed intelligence on British military installations, shipping movements, and civilian morale. They increased his salary and demanded more reports. There was only one problem. Some of Pujol's fabricated intelligence was dangerously accurate by accident, and some was absurdly wrong. When he reported that Glaswegians would do anything for a litre of wine, Scots being notorious whiskey drinkers, British intelligence took notice. This mysterious source was either a genius or a lunatic. MI5 finally contacted Pujol in February 1942. Within hours of meeting him, they realized what they had: a natural deception artist with established German trust and an imagination that could weaponize fiction. They brought him to London, gave him the codename GARBO, after the actress, because he was the greatest actor in the world, and set him loose. GARBO would become the double-cross system's crown jewel. By 1944, his network of fictional sub-agents had grown to 27. The Germans paid him over $20,000, real money for imaginary spies. Everything he sent was crafted by MI5 to support Allied strategy. The Nazis trusted him so completely they awarded him the Iron Cross. The British, recognizing his contribution, made him a member of the Order of the British Empire. He remains the only person to receive both decorations. December 1942, London. Duško Popov stepped out of the Savoy Hotel wearing a tailored suit that cost more than most Londoners earned in a year. At 30, the Serbian playboy moved through London's elite circles with effortless charm, dining with industrialists, gambling at private clubs, pursuing actresses and socialites. To anyone watching, he appeared to be exactly what he claimed: a wealthy businessman with diplomatic immunity, enjoying London while Europe burned. The Abwehr thought he was their most valuable British asset. They'd recruited him in 1940, impressed by his business connections and apparent sympathy for the German cause. They gave him the codename Ivan and tasked him with reporting on British military preparations, industrial capacity, and political sentiment. MI6 knew differently. Popov despised Nazism. He'd contacted British intelligence immediately after his German recruitment, offering to become a double agent. The British codenamed him TRICYCLE, not for his cycling habits, but because he ran a network of 3 agents. Like GARBO's network, TRICYCLE's sub-agents were fictional, their reports carefully orchestrated to mislead German intelligence. Popov's methods were unorthodox. He lived lavishly, spending German money on expensive hotels, fine dining, and romantic pursuits. His handlers justified it as maintaining his cover. The Abwehr believed a successful spy would live well. Popov obliged enthusiastically, bedding French actress Simone Simon while simultaneously transmitting fabricated military intelligence. His playboy lifestyle had an unexpected consequence. Ian Fleming, then working for British naval intelligence, met Popov several times during the war. The charming Serbian spy who gambled in casinos, seduced beautiful women, and carried out dangerous intelligence missions would later inspire Fleming's most famous creation, James Bond. But Popov was no mere socialite. He provided critical deception for Operation Fortitude, convincing the Germans that Allied invasion forces were larger and positioned differently than reality. His reports about fictional army divisions and fabricated equipment deployments helped ensure that when D-Day arrived, German forces would be looking in the wrong direction. December 16, 1942, over the English Channel. Eddie Chapman parachuted into the darkness above Cambridgeshire, his heart pounding. Below, England waited, the country he'd fled 3 years earlier as a wanted criminal. Above, the Luftwaffe plane that had dropped him droned back toward occupied France. In his pack, a radio transmitter, $1,000 and explosives. His mission: destroy the de Havilland aircraft factory producing mosquito bombers. Chapman was a safecracker, a conman, and a womanizer. Before the war, he'd blown safes across England until the police had finally caught him. He'd been rotting in a Jersey prison when the Germans invaded the Channel Islands in 1940. Sensing opportunity, he'd volunteered to spy for the Abwehr. They'd trained him in occupied France, teaching him espionage, sabotage, and radio operation. Now they were sending him home to commit an act of war. Chapman surrendered to British authorities within hours of landing. MI5 interrogated him at Camp 020, discovered his criminal background, assessed his loyalties, and made a calculation. This charming criminal could be useful. They turned him, giving him the codename ZIGZAG, reflecting his unpredictable zigzagging life path. The mission to destroy the de Havilland factory became an elaborate theatrical production. MI5 enlisted stage designers and camouflage experts to make the factory appear bombed from the air. They scattered rubble, created fake burn patterns, and demolished a building due for demolition anyway. They arranged for the Daily Express to print a fabricated story about an explosion at a factory. Aerial reconnaissance photographs showed the damage. Chapman transmitted to Germany, mission accomplished. The Abwehr was thrilled. They recalled him to occupied France, where Hitler personally awarded him the Iron Cross, making Chapman the only British citizen to receive Germany's highest military honor. The mosquito factory continued full production, untouched. These were the players: a Spanish chicken farmer who invented imaginary agents, a Serbian playboy who inspired James Bond, and a British criminal who conned the Nazis. Together with dozens of others, they formed the cast of Britain's greatest wartime deception. The Lie Machine Focus: how the double-cross system operated day to day, March 1943. 58 St. James's Street, London, 20 committee meeting. The conference room table was covered with papers, intelligence reports, radio transcripts, military orders, weather forecasts, shipping schedules. Masterman surveyed the chaos with satisfaction. This was the machinery of deception operating at full capacity. GARBO transmitted yesterday about the 5th Division's movement to Dover, began Major Robertson. The Germans confirmed receipt and requested more details. Around the table, representatives from MI5, MI6, Army Intelligence, Naval Intelligence, and RAF Intelligence leaned forward. Every transmission through the double-cross system required their approval. A single inconsistency could unravel years of careful work. "Did he mention the embarkation equipment?" asked the Naval Intelligence representative. "Negative. We're holding that back for next week. We want them to work for the information. If it comes too easily, they'll suspect a plant." This was the daily rhythm of the double-cross system, calibrating truth and lies to maintain German trust while supporting Allied operations. Every message walked a tightrope. Too much truth endangered British forces. Too much fiction risked exposing the agents as double. The balance required exquisite judgment. The system operated on several principles, refined through 3 years of trial and error. First, mix lies with verifiable truth. Agents regularly transmitted accurate but tactically meaningless information, weather reports, bomb damage assessments, civilian morale observations. This established their credibility. When the critical moment came, that credibility would be exploited to devastating effect. Second, timing was everything. Accurate information could be transmitted if it arrived too late for the Germans to act on it. Agent Tate once reported a convoy's departure after it had already reached port. The intelligence was correct, demonstrating Tate's access to sensitive information, but operationally useless. The Abwehr rewarded him for the report. Third, the system required coordination with military operations. Before any offensive, commanders briefed the 20 committee on what deceptions would support the operation. The double agents would then transmit lies designed to pull German forces out of position or reinforce German misconceptions. A typical day. Agent GARBO's network, Juan Pujol García, Agent GARBO, transmitted to Madrid 3 times per week. Each message a masterpiece of fabrication. By 1943, his network had grown elaborate. His fictional sub-agents included Agent 3, a Venezuelan student in Glasgow, who reported on shipping. Agent 5, a Welsh Aryan fanatic in Dover who monitored military installations. Agent 7-2, a Welsh NCO in the British Army who provided military intelligence. None existed. GARBO invented their personalities, backstories, and observations. MI5 provided the intelligence content. The combination was irresistible to the Abwehr. A March 1943 transmission illustrates the process. GARBO's Agent 5 reported seeing increased military activity in Dover, landing craft in harbour, soldiers conducting embarkation exercises, fuel depot expansion. All accurate. The report suggested preparation for a cross-channel operation targeting Calais. Completely false. The truth validated the lie. The Germans correlated GARBO's report with similar intelligence from TRICYCLE and Brutus. All 3 agents, unknown to the Abwehr, were controlled by the 20 committee. When 3 independent sources reported the same thing, German intelligence accepted it as confirmed fact. The Führer moved 2 panzer divisions to Calais. No invasion came. The technical challenge running double agents required more than clever lies. It demanded technical expertise. Each agent had a unique radio fist, the distinctive rhythm of their Morse code transmission. If an agent was captured and replaced, German radio operators would detect the change. MI5 solved this by having agents continue operating their own transmitters under British supervision. Codes posed another challenge. The Abwehr used relatively simple ciphers that Bletchley Park cryptographers could break. This allowed the British to read German responses to double-agent transmissions, verifying that the deceptions were working. When the Germans requested specific information, the 20 committee knew immediately and could respond through their agents. The system also exploited German bureaucracy. The Abwehr and SD, Sicherheitsdienst, rarely shared intelligence. An agent reporting to the Abwehr wouldn't be cross-checked against SD sources. The British could tell different lies to different German services, knowing they wouldn't compare notes. The human factor. Despite the technical sophistication, success ultimately depended on understanding human psychology. The Germans wanted to believe their espionage network was successful. Confirmation bias worked in Britain's favor. When double agents reported what the Abwehr expected to hear, those reports were accepted with minimal scrutiny. MI5 also exploited German racism. When GARBO's fictional Aryan agents provided information, it was weighted more heavily than reports from agents of other backgrounds. The British crafted their deceptions to appeal to Nazi prejudices. By mid-1943, the double-cross system was fully operational. Every German agent in Britain was controlled. Every transmission was a lie calibrated to British interests. The Abwehr believed it had comprehensive intelligence coverage of the British Isles. In reality, it was blind. The stage was set for the greatest deception of the war, Operation Fortitude. Focus, planning and executing the D-Day deception, January 1944, Norfolk House, London, Chef Headquarters. General Dwight D. Eisenhower studied the map of northern France with the concentration of a man who held millions of lives in his hands. Around the table, the architects of Operation Overlord, the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe, faced their greatest challenge: how to land on a fortified coast without being slaughtered on the beaches. Colonel John Bevan, chief of the London Controlling Section, leaned forward. His department specialized in strategic deception. He'd been planning this moment for 6 months. "Gentlemen, the Germans know we're coming. They've fortified every major port from Norway to Spain. We cannot achieve surprise about whether we'll invade, but we can deceive them about where and when." The map showed the challenge clearly. The Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, was the obvious invasion route. 15 miles of water separated Dover from Calais. It was the shortest crossing, offered the straightest path to Germany, and put Allied forces within fighter range from English airfields. Hitler knew this. He'd concentrated his best divisions there, the 15th Army, heavily fortified and ready. Rommel had personally overseen the Atlantic Wall's strongest defenses along that coast. The actual invasion target was Normandy, 150 miles to the southwest. The beaches there were less fortified, but success depended on German forces staying away long enough for the Allies to establish a beachhead. If Hitler rushed reinforcements to Normandy in the first 48 hours, the invasion could fail catastrophically. "We need them looking at Calais," Eisenhower said, "not just on D-Day, but for weeks after. Even when we're landing in Normandy, they must believe Calais is the real target." Thus was born Operation Fortitude, the most elaborate military deception in history. Fortitude South, the Phantom Army. The centerpiece of the deception was audacious. Create a fictional army group, position it in southeast England opposite Calais, and convince the Germans it would lead the invasion. The first United States Army group, ZIGZAG, existed only on paper and in German imagination. Its commander was real, General George S. Patton, the most aggressive and feared American general. The Germans respected and feared Patton. If he commanded the invasion force, it would surely be the main attack. To make ZIGZAG convincing, the Allies deployed an arsenal of deception techniques. Physical deception. Hundreds of inflatable tanks, trucks and artillery pieces were deployed across Kent and Sussex. From the air, they looked like massive armored formations. Dummy landing craft, constructed from canvas, wood and empty barrels, filled harbours in Dover, Folkestone and Ramsgate. Big supply depots with inflatable equipment appeared on reconnaissance photographs. Radio deception. Real signal units transmitted thousands of fake radio messages, simulating the communications of divisions, corps, and army headquarters. German radio intelligence intercepted these transmissions and plotted ZIGZAG's positions on their maps. The Phantom Army came alive in the electromagnetic spectrum. Double agents, Every controlled German agent in Britain reported on FUSAG. GARBO's network provided the most detailed intelligence. His fictional subagents observed patterned visiting units, reported on division insignia, described embarkation preparations. TRICYCLE confirmed the reports from different locations. Brutus added military details that only an insider would know. The beauty of the system was its redundancy. Multiple agents, operating independently from German perspective, reported the same false information. Intelligence services trust confirmation from multiple sources. The 20 Committee provided exactly that, all from agents they controlled. April 1944, Hertfordshire, GARBO's safe house. Juan Pujol García composed his longest transmission yet. The message detailed FUSAG's order of battle, corps assignments, division locations, equipment inventories. It took 3 hours to encrypt and transmit. In Madrid, Abwehr officers received the intelligence with excitement. GARBO was providing comprehensive coverage of Allied invasion preparations. They forwarded his reports to Berlin, where German High Command updated their maps. FUSAG's phantom divisions appeared as real threats. The deception was working. May 1944. Berchtesgaden, Germany. Führer headquarters. Adolf Hitler studied intelligence reports with his customary paranoia. Multiple sources confirmed massive Allied forces in southeast England. The logical target was Calais. Shortest crossing, best port facilities, direct route to the Ruhr industrial region. But intelligence also indicated preparations in southwest England, opposite Normandy. Hitler's instincts suggested Normandy might be the real target, with Calais a feint. His generals disagreed. The evidence for Calais was overwhelming. Hitler compromised. Keep strong forces at Calais, but reinforce Normandy's defences. He ordered additional divisions to the Atlantic Wall, but the 15th Army stayed at Calais. He couldn't risk leaving the obvious invasion route undefended. This was exactly what the Allies needed. German forces split between two targets, unable to concentrate against either. June 5, 1944. Southwick House, Portsmouth. Eisenhower's final briefing. The invasion was hours away. Eisenhower had made the hardest decision of his life: proceed despite terrible weather. Delay would waste months of preparation and compromise operational security. Colonel Bevan reported on Fortitude's status. German intelligence still believes FUSAG will invade Calais. Our agents have positioned the Phantom Army for attack. When we land in Normandy tomorrow, the Germans will interpret it as a diversionary attack. They'll hold their reserves at Calais, waiting for Patton's real invasion. Eisenhower nodded. Everything depended on the next 72 hours. If German panzer divisions raced to Normandy immediately, they could drive the invasion back into the sea. If they stayed at Calais, waiting for a phantom army that would never come, the Allies would have time to establish an unbreakable foothold. The theatre of lies was ready for its greatest performance. D-Day focus, how the deception worked during the actual invasion, June 6, 1944. 6:30 a.m., Omaha Beach, Normandy. The ramps dropped. Men poured into hell. Machine gun fire tore through the first wave before they reached the sand. The water turned red. Above the chaos, explosions hammered the bluffs, where German defenders poured fire into the invasion force. 1,500 miles away, at various safe houses across England, double agents prepared the most critical transmissions of their lives. The invasion had begun. Now came the real test. Could they convince Hitler it was a feint? 9 a.m. GARBO's transmission post, London. Juan Pujol García sat at his radio, hands steady despite the enormity of what he was about to do. For 2 years, he'd built German trust with thousands of messages. Everything led to this moment. He didn't transmit immediately. That was crucial. If GARBO reported the invasion too quickly, the Germans might wonder how he'd learned about it so fast. Credibility required realistic timing. His fictional agents needed time to observe, travel, and report. At 8 p.m., 14 hours after the landings began, GARBO's transmitter crackled to life. The message was long, detailed, and devastating. His agent 77, the fictional Welsh NCO, had reported from Dover that FUSAG remained in position, fully equipped and apparently ready for operations. Agent 72 confirmed that Patton's headquarters showed no signs of movement. Agent 3 in Glasgow reported increased naval activity, suggesting additional operations were planned. The conclusion was clear. Normandy was a diversion. The real invasion would hit Calais, led by Patton and FUSAG. The Normandy landings were designed to draw German reserves away from Calais, leaving it vulnerable to the main attack. June 7, 1944, Berchtesgaden, Hitler's response. Hitler received GARBO's intelligence at midnight. He was already suspicious. The Normandy landings were too small for the main invasion, only 5 divisions in the first wave. Where were Patton's armies? Where were the main American forces? GARBO's message confirmed his instincts. Normandy was a trick. Calais remained the target. He ordered the 15th Army to hold position. Panzer divisions that could have been racing to Normandy stayed north, waiting for an invasion that existed only in British imagination. On the beaches, Allied forces fought desperately for every yard, but they weren't facing the full weight of German reserves. Those reserves were 150 miles away, frozen in place by a lie. June 8 to 9th, 1944, the critical hours. The deception had to continue. If the Germans realized Normandy was the only invasion, they'd throw everything at it. The beachhead was still vulnerable. Allied forces hadn't yet connected the 5 landing zones. A determined German counterattack could split the invasion and defeat it piecemeal. TRICYCLE transmitted from his London apartment. Confirmed sightings of FUSAG units moving to forward positions in Dover. Ships concentrating in harbour. All signs pointed to imminent operations. Brutus added military details. Ammunition stockpiles in southeast England, fuel depots at capacity, landing craft assembled. His position as a Polish officer gave him access to Allied military planning, or so the Germans believed. Treasure, the Russian émigré, reported conversations overheard in military circles. Officers spoke of Normandy as a preliminary operation. The main attack would follow within days. 3 agents, 3 independent confirmations. The Germans had no reason to doubt. Their entire espionage network in Britain, which unknown to them consisted entirely of British-controlled double agents, unanimously reported the same intelligence. June 10, 1944, Normandy beachhead. By the 3rd day, Allied forces had linked the beaches and pushed several miles inland. The critical moment had passed. The beachhead was secure enough to withstand counterattack, but Operation Fortitude continued. The double agents maintained their reports. FUSAG remained in position. Patton's attack was merely delayed, not cancelled. German reconnaissance flights over southeast England photographed dummy tanks and aircraft. German radio intelligence intercepted fake transmissions. Everything confirmed what GARBO had told them. Hitler kept the 15th Army at Calais for 7 weeks after D-Day. 19 divisions that could have crushed the Normandy invasion stayed north, defending against a phantom army. June 11th, 1944, Madrid. Abwehr headquarters. The chief of the Abwehr's British section composed a message to Agent GARBO. Your activity and that of your informants gave us a perfect idea of what is taking place over there. With such valuable and well-timed information, we could have reacted better had it not been for the stubborn refusal of Berlin to believe the reports. The irony was absolute. The Abwehr was thanking GARBO for intelligence that had directly contributed to Germany's defeat, while simultaneously complaining that Hitler hadn't trusted their spy network enough. They had no idea they'd been deceived. 3 days later, the Abwehr informed GARBO he was being awarded the Iron Cross, 2nd class, in recognition of his outstanding service to the Reich. The medal would be the only Iron Cross ever awarded for helping the Allies win World War II. July 1944. The deception continues. As Allied forces broke out from Normandy, the double agents continued their work. ZIGZAG redeployed to explain why it hadn't attacked Calais. New fictional operations were planned, then cancelled. The German 15th Army remained tied down by phantoms until late July, when the Normandy breakout made the Calais threat irrelevant. By then, it didn't matter. The Allies had won in Normandy. 7 weeks of delay in German reinforcement had allowed them to build an unstoppable force. Paris would fall in August, the Rhine would be crossed in March, Berlin would surrender in May. The theatre of lies had performed its greatest show, and the audience never knew they'd been watching fiction. The collapse of German trust, focus, how the deception unraveled, and German response, August 1944. Zossen, Germany, Wehrmacht, High Command. Colonel Friedrich Adolf Krummacher, Chief of Intelligence Evaluation, stared at the map with growing dread. Every red pin represented an Allied unit, confirmed in Normandy. The concentration was overwhelming, far more than intelligence had predicted. Where had they come from? His agents had reported most American forces concentrated in southeast England under Patton. Those forces should still be there. Yet here they were in Normandy, units that supposedly hadn't existed or were elsewhere. A terrible suspicion began forming. Could the intelligence be wrong, not just mistaken but deliberately false? He pulled files on British agents, Alaric, GARBO, Ivan, TRICYCLE, Brutus, Cherniavsky. All had perfect records, years of accurate reporting. All had confirmed ZIGZAG's existence. All had been wrong about the most important intelligence of the war. Krummacher reached for the phone, then stopped. If he was right, if British intelligence had been feeding them lies for years, the implications were catastrophic. It would mean every strategic decision based on that intelligence was compromised. It would mean the entire German intelligence service had been deceived. It would mean they'd been blind while believing they could see. He made the call. September 1944. The investigation begins. The Abwehr launched a review of its British network. Evidence accumulated quickly. ZIGZAG units spotted in Normandy had supposedly been in Kent. Divisions reported in southeast England appeared in combat hundreds of miles away. The Phantom Army had vanished because it had never existed. But how? The intelligence had come from multiple sources, independently operated, geographically separated. All had reported consistently. All had photographic and signals intelligence supporting their reports, unless they weren't independent, unless Britain had captured or turned every single agent, unless the entire network was controlled. It was almost unthinkable, yet no other explanation fit the facts. October 1944, the Abwehr's dissolution. Hitler's rage was volcanic. His intelligence service had been feeding him lies while he'd based strategic decisions on them. Divisions had been held at Calais for phantom threats, while real attacks succeeded elsewhere. The Führer's instincts had been right. Normandy was the real target, but his intelligence had contradicted him. In October 1944, Hitler dissolved the Abwehr entirely, transferring intelligence functions to the SD under Himmler. The organization that had run German military intelligence since 1921 ceased to exist, a casualty of its own deception. But the double-cross system's work wasn't finished. The war continued, and German intelligence, now reorganized under the SD, still trusted some of their British agents. GARBO and the others continued transmitting, now feeding lies to different masters. December 1944, V-2 rocket deception. As Germany's military position collapsed, Hitler placed desperate hope in wonder weapons. The V-2 rocket program aimed to terrorize London into surrender. Launched from occupied Netherlands, the rockets were unstoppable, supersonic missiles that hit without warning, but they were also wildly inaccurate. German engineers needed impact reports to adjust aim and maximize damage. They relied on their British agents to provide those reports. The double agents obliged with carefully calculated lies. Rockets hitting central London were reported as falling in northern suburbs. Rockets overshooting the city were reported as direct hits. The Germans adjusted their aim based on this false feedback, systematically shifting impact points away from London's centre into less populated areas. Thousands of lives were saved by deliberately inaccurate intelligence reports. The Germans never suspected their agents were misdirecting their weapons. April 1945. The final transmissions. As Soviet forces closed on Berlin, German intelligence operations collapsed into chaos. Radio contact with British agents became sporadic, then ceased. The handlers who'd run agents for years disappeared, fled, captured, or dead. GARBO transmitted his final message on May 5, 1945. After 315 letters and over 2,000 radio messages spanning 3 years, the greatest double agent of the war signed off. His handlers in Madrid were gone. Germany would surrender in 3 days. The theatrical performance had ended. The audience was dead or fled. The stage stood empty. Post-war, the truth emerges. In the immediate aftermath of surrender, Allied forces captured German intelligence archives. The depth of the deception began emerging. Documents showed the Abwehr had trusted their British network almost to the end. Even after ZIGZAG was exposed as fictional, some German officers insisted the deception had been a limited operation, not a systematic compromise. The truth was far worse. Britain had captured or turned every single German agent sent to the UK. Every single one. The Abwehr's entire British network had been controlled opposition from 1941 onward. For 4 years, German intelligence had been blind while believing it had comprehensive coverage. Post-war interrogations revealed the German perspective. Abwehr officers described their British network as their most valuable intelligence source. They'd recommended numerous agents for decorations based on their excellent reporting. They'd increased funding and demanded more information. They had never suspected the truth. Some refused to believe it even after the war. The deception was too complete, too audacious. Surely, they argued, some agents must have been genuine. The alternative, that Britain had run a 4-year counterintelligence operation of unprecedented scope without a single compromise, seemed impossible. But it had happened. The theatre of lies had been perfect. Section 8. The Legacy Focus. Long-term Impact and Historical Significance, 1972, London. The secret revealed. For 27 years, the double-cross system remained classified. The agents who'd saved thousands of lives and changed history couldn't tell their stories. The officials who'd orchestrated the deception stayed silent. Britain's greatest intelligence triumph was unknown to the public it had protected. Then in 1972, John Cecil Masterman published The Double-Cross System in the War of 1939 to 1945. The book, initially classified and published only after prolonged negotiation with British authorities, revealed the system's existence and operation. The reaction was astonishment. Historians had known about individual deception operations, Operation Mincemeat, the Phantom Armies, but not that these were parts of a comprehensive system. The revelation that Britain had controlled every German agent fundamentally changed understanding of how the war was won. The strategic impact. Quantifying the double-cross system's impact is impossible. The battles it prevented, the ships it saved, the lives it preserved exist only as possibilities. But certain effects are clear. Operation Fortitude delayed German reinforcement of Normandy by 7 weeks. Military historians estimate this delay reduced Allied casualties in the first months after D-Day by tens of thousands. The invasion's success, history's largest amphibious operation, depended directly on the deception. The V-2 misdirection saved an estimated 10,000 civilian lives by systematically shifting rocket impacts away from central London. Countless smaller operations benefited from German misdirection, convoy routes, commando raids, bombing priorities. All were affected by intelligence that Germany believed reliable, but was actually crafted by their enemies. The agents' fates. The double agents who'd risked everything had varied post-war lives. Juan Pujol García, GARBO, feared German revenge. He faked his death in 1949, moved to Venezuela, and lived in obscurity until 1984, when a British intelligence historian tracked him down. He was finally publicly honored for his wartime service before his death in 1988. Duško Popov returned to peacetime business, wrote his autobiography Spy, Counterspy in 1974, and became publicly known as one of Ian Fleming's inspirations for James Bond. He died in 1981, recognized as one of the war's most effective intelligence operatives. Eddie Chapman resumed his criminal career after the war, was arrested multiple times, eventually settled down, and died in 1997. His story remained classified until 2001, when MI5 released his files. Others faded into obscurity, their contributions known only to the intelligence services they'd served. The Intelligence Revolution. The double-cross system transformed intelligence practice. Before World War II, espionage and counter-espionage were separate functions. The system demonstrated they could be integrated, that captured enemy agents were more valuable as deception tools than as prisoners. Modern intelligence services study the operation as a masterclass in strategic deception. The principles it established, using multiple corroborating sources, mixing truth with lies, exploiting confirmation bias, maintaining long-term patience, remain fundamental to deception operations today. The system also demonstrated the value of signals intelligence. Bletchley Park's ability to read German communications let the 20 committee verify their deceptions were working. This integration of code-breaking and counterintelligence became standard practice. Historical assessment military historians consider the double-cross system one of the most successful intelligence operations in history. Its scope, controlling all enemy agents in a nation for years, remains unmatched. Its impact, directly affecting the war's outcome, is undeniable. The operation succeeded because it combined multiple elements: aggressive counterintelligence that captured agents, psychological operations that understood enemy thinking, technical capabilities that maintained deceptions, and strategic patience that built trust over years. No single element would have worked alone. It also benefited from German failures. The Abwehr's trust in its agents bordered on naivety. Its lack of independent verification made deception easier. Its bureaucratic isolation from the SD prevented cross-checking. British intelligence exploited every weakness. The ultimate irony. The supreme irony is that Germany unknowingly paid for its own deception. The Abwehr transferred over $100,000 to its British agents during the war, money that funded MI5's operations. Germany paid Britain to lie to them. Those same agents received German decorations for outstanding service. Iron Crosses were awarded to men who'd spent years undermining the Reich. German officers wrote commendations praising intelligence that had led directly to German defeats. Even after the war ended, even after the truth emerged, some German intelligence officers insisted their British network had been valuable. The deception was so complete they couldn't accept they'd been fooled so thoroughly. The final transmission. In 1984, Juan Pujol García visited London for the first time since 1945. He was 72 years old, living quietly in Venezuela, his wartime exploits unknown to his neighbors. The British government finally could publicly honor him. At a ceremony attended by MI5 officials and military historians, Garcia received recognition for his service. When asked how it felt to have deceived the entire German intelligence service, the former chicken farmer who became history's greatest double agent smiled. "I just wanted to do something for the good of humanity," he said. To lie to evil men seemed like the right thing to do. The theater of lies had been built by ordinary people, criminals, farmers, playboys, academics who chose to fight totalitarianism with imagination rather than weapons. Their stage was invisible, their audience unaware they were watching fiction, but their performance helped save the world. And for 27 years afterward, no one knew they'd been acting at all.